All right, so now it's time to get the DAW set up so that we can get this process started of actually recording in the vocals. Now, of course, as I've already mentioned a bunch of times, it doesn't matter if you're not using Studio One like I'm using. You can use Logic or Ableton or whatever DAW you happen to be using. Of course, the different DAWs, one might look slightly different than the other, and there might be some processes that are a bit different depending on which one you're using, but the core principles always remain the same across all of these DAWs. So now there's one thing that I want to mention here before we actually dive into the DAW here in Studio One, and that is simply making sure that your interface setup is correct. So whatever interface you happen to be using, whether it's Focusrite Scarlett, whether it is an Apollo Twin like I'm using by UAD, it doesn't really matter. Whatever interface you have, make sure that you know how to use it. And of course, if you're still pretty new to this and you're not sure how to set everything with your interface, YouTube has a bunch of information out there that is going to help you to make sure that everything is up and running the way it should be. But one point about the interface is just make sure that it doesn't clip. Make sure that your input gain, the volume that comes through the microphone and then through the interface, make sure that it isn't cranked. Because if it's cranked, then you are going to deal with clipping and distortion, all of that. You do not have to record hot or record loudly in terms of the signal going into the interface and then subsequently into the computer. Just please play it safe and make sure you turn down that input gain so that you don't clip. So once you have your interface set up and connected, and in this case, here is the audio setup under preferences in Studio One, playback device and recording device both set to the Universal Audio Thunderbolt, which is my Apollo Twin interface. All right, now let's segue into opening up the session that we are going to record these vocals into. Now you have, in essence, two choices here. The obvious choice is you could, of course, use the production session where everything else is in your production so far. So if you have started recording and producing your song, maybe you've got some drums and some guitars and some keys, whatever else, maybe you just have a demo version. Whatever you happen to have, you have this session with those tracks in that session, right? Well, of course, there's nothing wrong with going ahead and recording in the vocals, creating the tracks inside of that production session. However, there is an alternative to that approach that is very clean and that might be a better fit for you. And I want to offer you that alternative just in case this is a good fit for you. So sometimes what I like to do is actually bounce down the current version of the track that I'm working on so that it is just the instrumental. So if there's a scratch vocal or a demo vocal on there, I'll just mute that and then bounce down or mix down an instrumental version of the song that I'm working on. Then I'll drag that into a brand new session, which I will then call just my vocal session, so that in that session, then we have an instrumental track, and then the only other tracks in there are the vocals we record. So there isn't a right or wrong here. You can 100% choose whichever one feels best to you. But in this case, I'm going to use the second approach here because it also, just in terms of aesthetics and the cleanness of you being able to watch this and not be distracted with a bunch of other tracks, it's just going to look better and it's going to be, I think, flow a bit more smoothly if we create our own vocal session. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to hit new, I'm going to create a new session, and now I'm just going to start with a blank session. So I'm going to go, this is going to be, let me see. So I'm going to use my song Satellite. And this is going to be the vocal session. Okay, so we hit OK, and now we've got our session right here. Now what we can do is drag in our instrumental mix. So I have that here. I already bounced this down, so if we drag it in here like that, there is our instrumental mix, and it sounds like this. Right? So this is what we're going to use, and then we are going to record the vocals to this instrumental mix. Now, just a quick point here that I probably should mention is that this instrumental mix probably sounds more mixed than your instrumentals will at this stage in the process, because I'm pulling this instrumental mix into this session after I've completely completed the mix in the first place. So this is a pretty well mixed instrumental already. Yours don't have to be this well mixed, especially if you're early on in the process still and you're just transitioning your song from a demo version into a more fully produced version. But in any case, that is our instrumental mix. And then once that is put into the session, what we can do then is start to create a little template almost, where we start to add some vocal tracks to it. So if we come in here, let's add a vocal track here, and then we can go lead vocal 1. So let's focus on the lead vocals for now. Now, once I have lead vocal 1, I can just duplicate it, and it automatically marks it as lead vocal 2, lead vocal 3. I'll just do 3. So we'll do 3 lead vocal tracks for color code these, something like that. And then what I'm gonna do, actually before I do that, give me one. Let's do this. So add another audio track, and this will be the background vocal 1, and then I'll do the same thing here. Duplicate, duplicate, maybe get about 5 of these. And then we can always delete tracks or add tracks, of course. So color code these so they look a bit different from what we have. So we have the 3 lead vocals, the 5 background vocals. Now what I want to do is create a bus for the lead vocals and a bus for the background vocals. And the reason I want to do this is because if I'm going to put in-ear processing in my ears, so that means as I'm listening in my headphones, as I'm recording, the sound of my voice in my headphones live as I'm recording, if I'm going to use plugins on that, I don't want to use plugins on every individual track. Because if I have take 1, take 2, take 3, I want them to all go through the same bus so that I only need to use one instance of whichever plugins I decide to use. So I went ahead, I'm going to go ahead, selected these 3 lead vocals, right click, and add bus for selected channels. So now this is our lead vocals bus, which means these 3 tracks are now being routed. They're making a quick stop on this channel here before they go to the main output. Okay, so we have these 3, and then I'll quickly do the same with the background vocals. Select all of those, add bus for selected channels, and then this is the background vocals bus. Color code that white, since that's always how I recognize my buses. And now we have the lead vocals and the background vocals. Very clean, just very organized. And now, once you have something like this, you can actually, in your DAW, make this your vocal template. So you could 100% come in here and make this a template by, let me see, save as template. You know, it might be in a different place depending on the DAW you're using, but you can come in here and save this as your template. And then every time you open up a new session, you have the option of using this template so that you don't have to do this process I just did. And you only have to do it once. And then every subsequent time, it is already laid out. The track is laid and ready to go for you. So templates are really cool because they really do help you save time, and it allows you to just quickly get in and start recording those vocals. All right, now let's quickly talk about in-ear processing. And that is, of course, the sound that we hear with the vocals in our headphones as we're recording. So I'm going to come over here, since we're first going to focus on the lead vocals and maybe exclusively on the lead vocals, although I think I am going to touch on the background vocals in Module 2 here, but we might actually focus more with the background vocals just in Module 5 when we mix them down. And I have my own reasons for that, which I'll get into. But for now, let's solely focus in on the lead vocals. And my go-to plugin for this type of thing, if I just want to monitor and have a sound in my headphones that feels mixed, I love using a plugin like JJP Vocals from Waves. And this is just great because this sounds mixed already in your headphones as you're singing in. So it helps you to kind of get in the flow of things. So if I come in here and I'm like, okay, if I want to record this, right, here's without that, but here's with it. So if we come in here, oh yeah, oh yeah, here's without, oh yeah, oh yeah, right, it just, let me turn this back off. It sounds a bit drier, right? It's just not quite, it's harder to get into the mood and the vibe and the energy of the song if the sound that you're hearing in your headphones is that completely dry sound. Now, that said, there are instances where, because of what's called latency, and latency means the distance in time between when you sing into the microphone and when you hear that in your headphones. So if there is a gap, let me actually show you where if I come in here and I turn this block size up to like 48, the latency is going to be turned up. So if I come in here, I'm speaking, but I'm hearing myself in my headphones with a delay, and it'll completely throw you off. So there are some interfaces that have the option, and I think most interfaces have this, that allow for direct monitoring. So that means you can actually hear the vocal that you are singing in the moment, not go through your DAW and back out the interface into your headphones. The sound hits the interface and shoots right back into your headphones. So it's no latency. So that's, of course, always better than latency with processing or mixed or any type of mixed sound on your vocal. So use whatever works best, use whatever gives you the best takes, and just make the most of what you have. But in this case, I really do like using a plugin to help the vocal sound a bit mixed. So let's come back here and let's put this device block size back up to actually 256 is usually what I have when I'm recording. And this is an important part actually in terms of latency, is you probably want to come in here and make sure that your device block size is around 256 or 512. Usually beyond that, you're going to start to deal with some latency if you go for 1024 or 2048. And this, by the way, is also another reason why it can be a great idea to create a brand new session just for the vocals, because if your production session already has a bunch of tracks in it and your CPU is already running a bit hard and you might have a few glitches here and there and it's not running smoothly, then it's going to be hard. Sometimes you actually have to move these up here so that higher process of the DAW and all the tracks doesn't glitch, because the higher or the lower the number here on these samples, the harder your computer works. So D6 is great, especially that there's not really any tracks here besides the instrumental, so my computer's not really working hard at all. Now I'm going to do one more thing here as well. I'm going to grab just a little reverb, literally a little reverb, because it's called little plate, and I'm going to add this to the chain as well. And I'll bring the mix probably somewhere back in here somewhere. And let me turn that one back on. And now let's see what that sounds like in our ears. So that's plenty. Might want to go even more with the low cut. Something like this. And now, let's see how it sounds with the instrumental. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'll fight this, 'cause I'm usually all in. It's so indecisive. I'm not even in the right part of the song, I don't think. But, oh yeah. Do you notice how much more mixed my voice sounds? And I feel like I can really get a feel for the emotion and what the song is actually going to sound like, at least somewhat, in the final result. So that's why I'm a huge fan of using plugins to run the vocal through as you're listening back in your headphones when you're recording. Now, just for the sake of clarity, please know that when you're putting plugins just on the tracks or on the buses, these plugins, these effects are not getting printed onto the tracks themselves. This is just, it's running through it and you're hearing it in your headphones. But the actual audio that I record, like the actual audio that I record here like this audio here on this track, this is completely unprocessed. So it's not like these plugins are printed onto this track. There are ways to do that, but I'm not going to cover that and I actually don't really recommend that unless you really, really know what you're doing and you've already moved past the beginner and intermediate stages and you're becoming more of an advanced recording engineer and producer and all of that. Then if you're at that stage, then you already know. I don't really have to explain these things to you probably anyway. All right, now one more thing before I wrap up this video, and that is we want to set the volume level of the lead vocal, or the volume of what we hear in our headphones as we're singing, at least as it relates and as it connects to that instrumental track, because we want the lead vocal to sit well and we don't want it to be too loud in our headphones and also not too quiet. So we want to find a good place, because what happens when your lead vocal is too loud, so let me give you an example of that. If the lead vocal is too loud in my headphones, my side, my kryptonite, oh yeah, yeah, uh-huh. The problem there is that this lead vocal is so loud in the mix, you'll deal with some pitch issues probably because you're not hearing the instrumental well, but it's also when your vocal is so loud in the mix that you actually tend to back off your energy because it feels almost intimidating. It feels like you're hearing this monster sound that's really loud and disproportionately loud compared to the instrumental, that you feel like you should back off and not sing with as much energy, and you should just be a bit more restrictive. And that's not good. So these things will affect that. So you want to make sure that you bring that lead vocal or the monitor level in your headphones into a good place. So I'm going to mess around with this for a little bit until I find a place that kind of feels right to me. Flickering light, my satellite, my satellite. Or maybe she's a thorn in my side, my kryptonite, my kryptonite. I don't know how to fight this, cause I'm usually all in, but so indecisive. Driving through an East Colorado town. Something like that I think is really, really close. So I think that's about perfect. And obviously, once we officially start recording these vocals, then we can adjust as we go. But that's pretty much it. Now, there's one final thing I just thought of that I don't want to forget to mention here, and that is, you may be asking, and you may have tried this before, you may have tried using Autotune on the lead vocal mix here as far as what you're hearing in your headphones. Again, it's not getting printed, but you're hearing Autotune in your headphones. So let me actually show you what that could look like. So I think this song is in the key of B flat. Is it? Flickering light, my satellite. No, it's not G sharp. It is in G. So the problem with using really tight Autotune in your ears, here's the problem with it. You'll start to lose your frame of reference as to knowing when exactly you're actually in key. In your headphones, it's going to sound more pleasing, obviously, but the problem then becomes, if you go to record, flickering light, my satellite, my satellite. Or maybe she's a thorn in my side, my kryptonite, my kryptonite. I don't know how to fight. I don't actually know. The problem with that is I don't know exactly where my pitch is. And so if you end up wanting to not use as much Autotune in the final mix, then the recording itself is probably going to be pretty pitchy because you didn't have a clear reference. It was snapping every note to that grid of whatever key the Autotune was set to. And then what that often does is it deceives you, and then you don't really know precisely what the actual note was that you're singing. You don't know for sure if you were sharp or flat, and then it becomes really hard to adjust for the next note and the next note, and it can just become a big problem in terms of your then overall recording sounding extremely pitchy. So I don't recommend using Autotune in your monitors, in your headphones, as you are recording in your vocals. You can break the rule, especially if it's more ad-libby parts, or if it's the parts of the song where you know already that you really want a bunch of Autotune. But I would say it's better to be safe than sorry in this case, so I would not recommend using Autotune in your headphones as you're recording your vocals. Okay? So that, my friend, is all you need to know. I think I covered pretty much all the bases, and now let's actually go ahead and let's dive in and let's start recording in the lead vocals. starting with a little checklist that I'm going to walk you through in the next video so that you are well equipped and prepared to get the best vocal take possible. So let's go ahead and dive into that.